A mob of 10,000 zombies broke down the security fence in Survivor City. Hello all. This is Jacobson and this is a brief retelling of the 7th and 8th episodes of the 6th season of the zombie series The Walking Dead. You can see the previous episodes at the links in the video description. As soon as this video gets 200 likes, I will release the next part. Enjoy watching it.
In the alley where Nicholas and Glenn fell from a dumpster into a herd of walkers, Glenn lies pressed against Nicholas' body while walkers dismember him. Eventually, Glenn sneaks to safety under a dumpster, hitting walkers who reach for him until their corpses block him. Days pass while Glenn waits for the herd to move on. Finally he crawls out, looking for water. Raising his head, the voice says a moment before the water bottle falls to the ground. This is the Nit, which stands on the roof of a neighboring building. She tells Glenn that Alexandria has been attacked, but runs away before he can question her further. Glenn chases Enid down the street, but loses sight of her. Rick examines the perimeter wall and notices a crack in the wall through which blood is seeping from the other side. Rick joins Maggie at the observation post, where she anxiously scans the horizon for a sign from Glenn. Rick offers to distract the walkers from Alexandria so that Glenn and the others can return safely. Meanwhile, Glenn finds David, an Alexandrian who died at the fence and has now turned, and stabs him in the head. Nearby he finds a farewell note that David wrote to his wife. He starts to return to Alexandria, but at the last moment changes his mind and goes to Zaynat. Back in Alexandria, Gabriel puts up the signs for the prayer circle that he had planned for that day. Rick rips off the sign as he passes Gabriel, who patiently replaces it with a new one. Rick and Carl teach Ron how to use guns. He emphasizes how important it is to wait for the right moment to shoot and not put your finger on the trigger until you are ready to shoot. He gives Ron an unloaded pistol and does not allow him to practice with cartridges. Morgan is heading to the infirmary when Rick calls out to him. Rick, Michonne and Carol discuss with Morgan his refusal to kill the wolves during the attack. Morgan claims that all life is precious and that bad people are capable of changing. On the porch, Rick and Michonne come up with a strategy to distract walkers from Alexandria. Michonne urges Rick to enlist the help of the Alexandrians in carrying out the plan, but Rick is not sure. Diana enters and excitedly talks about plans to expand the community. She tells them that now she believes that there will be after. Rosita offers machete lessons to a group of Alexandrians. Eugene takes part, but recoils from the weapon and admits that he is afraid of death. Rosita sternly tells him that it's easy to die. It's hard to let your friends die because you were too scared to save them. Eugene leaves, and Rosita continues her lesson. Meanwhile, Glenn finds Enid hiding in a restaurant. He orders her to return to Alexandria, but she refuses. When Glenn becomes more insistent and Enid points a gun at him. However, she reluctantly obeys when he takes the gun away from her. In Alexandria, Rick is building new supports for the wall. Tobin joins him. As they set up the wooden planks, Tobin sees a crack in the wall through which blood is seeping from the outside. Rick assures him that the wall will stand as long as they strengthen it. Tobin admits that the residents didn't want to change, and admits that Rick was right all along. "Don't give up on us," Tobin urges. Glenn and Enid find green orbs left over from Rick's mission to destroy walkers. And Neat suggests using balls to distract them. Glenn directs her to a bush where there are even more balloons and a helium balloon. While Enid inflates balloons, she tells him that she was orphaned by walkers. Glenn teaches her not to act rashly out of fear. In a storeroom in Alexandria, Rono knocks over items to distract Olivia and steal ammo from the armory. Glenn and Neat finally arrive in Alexandria and discover that she is surrounded by walkers. Neat's mood drops, but Glenn insists that they move on. Meanwhile, Spencer climbs over the wall using a rope, which he attached to the watchtower with a hook. Rick shouts at Spencer to turn back, but he doesn't turn around. Tara and Eugene notice that the rope is loosening, and Eugene goes for help. When Hook loses his grip, Spencer falls into the herd. Tara hangs off the wall and starts shooting at walkers so that he has a chance to escape. Shortly after, Rick, Tobin, and Morgan manage to pull Spencer to safety. Rick reproaches Tara for putting her life in danger to save the Alexandrian, and then turns his anger on Spencer. Spencer explains that he intended to find a car to distract walkers from the wall. Rick orders Spencer to come to him before embarking on any future strategies. In the infirmary, Denise wonders when Morgan comes in to ask for antibiotics, why he needs them. After some questioning, he admits that they are not for him. Carol watches suspiciously as Morgan leads Denise to a townhouse with a prison cell where Owen, the leader of the wolves, is being held. She goes to Jesse's house and asks if she can look after Judith, under the pretext that she needs to stand guard. At the townhouse, Carol unlocks the door, but Morgan won't let her in. She demands to tell who he keeps in the cell. Meanwhile, Carl is walking down the street. Aaron is quietly following him, holding a gun in his hand. While Rick and Tobin are reinforcing the wall, Rick sees Tara and apologizes for yelling at her. Deanna thanks Rick for saving Spencer, but Rick objects and says she should thank Tara. Odin informs him that she has already done it. She asks why he decided to save Spencer. Because he's your son, Rick replies. As Maggie stands guard, she sees the balloons that Glenn and Nit used to distract walkers fly off into the sky. She runs to the scream, saying it must be Glenn. But the moment her hope is revived, the watchtower topples over and crashes into the perimeter wall. Outside, the watchtower collapses, knocking a panel off the wall around the perimeter of Alexandria. When walkers enter through the hole, Rick orders everyone to run to their homes and lock the doors. Instead of retreating with the other residents, Diana joins Rick, fighting off the walkers. She saves him from a close collision, but gets injured by falling on the saw blade. Rick helps her up and they continue to fight. Meanwhile, Carol runs down the street, stumbles and falls to the ground. At the same time, her gun breaks and she wounds her head. Morgan helps her up and they run to a townhouse with a makeshift prison cell. Denise is still alone with Owen, both of them unaware of the walkers that are now swarming in Alexandria. Maggie climbs up to the observation post, having been wounded in the leg by one of the stray Puldiana. She barely manages to escape from the horde of walkers who grab her by the legs and try to push her down the stairs while she climbs to safety. Eugene presses himself against the wall, trying to remain unnoticed. He notices a walkie-talkie on the ground and hears Daryl calling Rick. Eugene picks it up and calls fearfully into the speaker for help. When the walker begins to approach, Rosita and Tara rescue him and run to a nearby garage. They manage to close the door when a massive group of walkers overtakes them and tries to break in. Rick helps the injured Diana walk down the street, where they are joined by Michonne, Gabriel, Carl and Ron. Jesse comes to the rescue, shoots at the advancing walkers and leads the group to his house. Both Neat and Glenn watch in disbelief as crowds of walkers pour in from the perimeter. And Nit is pessimistic and tells Glenn that's how it all happens. Glenn insists that no matter how bad it looks, there are people inside who care about her. He informs her that Maggie is pregnant and tries to convince Nit that she has to help, not give up. Inside the house, Rick carries Diana to the upstairs bedroom and puts her to bed. Sam opens the door and catches a glimpse of what is happening. He is paralyzed by fear, but Jesse urges him to be brave. On the main floor of the townhouse, Carol, having learned that the streets are filled with walkers, tries to get back on her feet. Morgan stops her, explaining that she probably has a concussion. He insists that she rest, and Carol obeys. On the floor below, Denise is sharing a room with Owen. She keeps her distance from him, but gives in to his attempt to strike up a conversation. He mentions a wound on the side of his stomach and says that he cut himself while hacking into the car, and then Denise asks to show the wound. Owen removes the bandage, exposing a badly infected wound. Denise carefully takes out a bag of intravenous fluid from her bag and comes closer. Returning to the house, examining Dina's wound, Michonne discovers a bite mark on her side. "Oh, shit," Deanna says, seemingly resigned to her fate. Rick talks to Jesse and comes up with a plan to get to the armory when the walkers start to gather in one place. He says he can distract walkers from Alexandria with flares, and at the same time get weapons. Michonne, meanwhile, tells Dina that she believes in Alexandria and Dina's plans to expand it. Downstairs in the garage, Carl checks on Ron, who is upset and thinking about his father. They start arguing as Ron slowly walks towards the door. Closing it, he turns around and pulls out a gun. Carl reacts quickly and knocks the gun out of Ron's hands before he can use it. While they are fighting, Ron swings a shovel at Carl, but accidentally breaks a window. At the sound of breaking glass, walkers immediately appear. Rick and Jesse hear the commotion and run to the garage. Rick grabs an axe and tries to kick down the door while Ron and Carl continue to fight. When Rick manages to open the door, Ron and Carl run into the house, and walkers run into the garage. Rick and Jesse press the sofa against the door, assisted by Gabrielle and Michonne. When asked what happened, Carl covers for Ron and says that they accidentally knocked over a shelf that broke a window and attracted walkers. Carl follows Ron into an empty room and pulls out his weapon. Holding him at gunpoint, Carl demands that Ron hand over the weapon. Ron obeys and does not resist. He apologizes for attacking Carl, who sympathizes with Ron over the loss of his father. However, he notes that Pete was an asshole. Vic hears Judith crying and runs upstairs. He goes to the room where he put Diana on the bed, and sees nothing but a bloodstain from her wound. Frightened, he goes to Judith's room. He sees Dina from behind leaning towards the baby's crib. Believing that she has turned, Rick approaches her to kill her. "It's still me," Dina shouts. She says she wanted to see Judith one last time, but she had other plans at her feet. Seeing that she is even weaker than before, Rick gently puts Diana on the bed. She gives him farewell notes for Spencer and Maggie and asks him to take care of Spencer as well as his own people. Rick is skeptical, but Diana insists, "They're all your people." In the garage of the townhouse, Eugene reads a history book while Tara and Rosita discuss their situation. Rosita assumes that Abraham is dead, but Tara says that's not true because she didn't see it. Rosita suggests knocking down the door so they can get out and move on. Eugene intervenes, stating that breaking locks is in his power and proceeds to break in. At this point, Carol pretends to be asleep while Morgan looks down at the makeshift prison cell. When he climbs back up, she's nowhere to be found. He starts to look around, but is pushed away when Carol runs down the stairs. Entering the room where she keeps Owen, she pulls out a knife and orders Denise to move away from him. At this moment, Morgan appears with a staff in his hands. He stands between Carol and Owen, seemingly prepared for the inevitable confrontation. In Jesse's house, walkers break through the defenses and begin to break in. Rick blocks the stairs with a sofa, and most of the group retreats upstairs. He then tells Michonne that they will need 2 walkers. Morgan tries to talk Carol out of killing Owen. Carol declares that she doesn't want to kill Morgan and must get out of the way. Morgan knocks the knife out of Carol's hands and after a short struggle knocks her to the ground, knocking her unconscious. While he is distracted by her, Owen grabs Morgan's staff and beats him unconscious. He then takes Carol's knife and points it at Denise. Rick and Michonne put 2 dead walkers on the floor and announce that everyone is heading to the armory. Rick explains that the only way to ensure everyone's safety is to open up 2 walkers and smear themselves with entrails. Thus, they will be indistinguishable from the herd. Michonne tells Dinah that they have to leave the house and offers to kill Dinah before she turns. Deanna refuses, preferring to shoot herself when the time comes. Then Diana takes Michonne by the hand and tells her to arrange and checkmate. Rick's group, throwing sheets on clothes, smeared with guts. Sam opens his door and recoils from the horrific scene. "Pretend to be brave," says Jesse. Sam, though he looks scared, nods. The group continues to smear themselves with guts. Owen breaks his bonds, and the moment Rosita, Tara and Eugene run into the room, he quickly grabs Denise and puts a knife to her neck. He forces them to lower their weapons, then takes the gun and runs away with Denise as a hostage. Rick's group, every member now covered in a sheet full of guts, goes down. They calmly make their way to the herd inside, remaining unnoticed. Glenn and Neat climb a tree to get a better vantage point. Glenn sees a helpless Maggie at the top of the observation post. Diana puts the gun to her chin, but does not pull the trigger after hearing the walkers in the hallway. She opens the door and shoots at the herd with a shout. Rick's group stands on the porch of Jesse's house and looks at the sea of walkers. Holding hands, they make their way through the herd. However, as they walk among the herd, Sam begins to call his mother, repeating "Mom" several times, which gradually attracts the attention of several walkers around them. Elsewhere, Daryl, Abraham and Sasha return to Alexandria, but are stopped by a group of bikers blocking the road. One of the bikers tells them to give up all their supplies and the truck, to which Daryl asks why we should do this. Then the biker declares, "Your property now belongs to Nigan."